I'm Steve Forbes, and you're watching Traders Nation.
Welcome back. You are tuning in to Traders Nation. My pleasure to have with us here today Orly Lobel, professor of law at the University of San Diego and book author of You Don't Own Me. I tell you what, a fantastic book. Unbelievable. Professor Lobel, thanks for being with us here today. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Sorry, you did write a fantastic book. You did a ton of research on You Don't Own Me. What brought you to write this true story?
This is a story that I just felt had to be told. The more I dug in and the more research and interviews and archival work I did, I just found these incredible roller coaster facts that I just felt, it's like a legal thriller, and it's as though it's fiction, but it's a true story, and it affects everybody. It's about how we play, the toys we play with, and how we own ideas, how we compete. So I just felt like it has something for everybody.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was going through and I read through some transactions that some of the things that you wrote about in You Don't Own Me, and certainly Mattel's got kind of a dark history, don't they? They've got a pretty interesting start, and then once they build up their empire, when Barbie went bananas, all right, don't they kind of have a dark history behind them, and as they rose to fame and rose to really holding the market share when it comes to toy dolls like Barbie?
That's right, and it's like history repeats. So the subtitle of the book of You Don't Own Me is Exposing the Dark Side of Barbie.
Sure.
And the dark side begins at the very inception of Mattel as a startup. They wanted us to think that they invented Barbie, but really I uncover where she came from, and she seems like this all-American doll and cultural icon, but really she has a much darker and maybe not so clean history from Europe.
Sure.
And then that already involved some litigation and some claims about ownership and intellectual property. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to today, now that Barbie finally has competition by other dolls and by other toy makers, Mattel uses its power. It's no longer a startup. It really has an army of attorneys, and it uses its power in the courtroom and in all kinds of questionable corporate strategies in the market to try to crush the competition.
Yeah, isn't that true though? Because I mean, anybody, if you can, you're a law professor, right? Anybody can sue anybody for any reason. You don't even have to have a good reason. You really don't, right? All you have to have is the money to do it, right? So if
you should have, right? But and that's you're absolutely right that this is the bigger picture of the book. So it takes place in Southern California in the toy and entertainment industry, but this is a universal story of how the big companies, the Goliath, uses the courtroom, uses the law to crush the Davids and to prevent new entry. Sure. And you're right, you don't really need a good reason or a good claim to bring a lawsuit to court, and it really is part of the arguments that I'm making in the book that even when the small company has good defenses and can eventually win the lawsuit, everybody loses, and it's really about the staying power and the ability, the resources, and these are huge resources. I show how this particular litigation that the story I tell throughout the book that lasted now for 10 years. Right now, it's even still kind of unfolding. It cost the two sides over $600 million just in attorney fees. Yeah. So you can imagine how costly this is.
It was huge, and the $600 million between both companies, and we're talking about MGA and Mattel. That's a lot of money to be spent for that self-preservation. Mattel must have been really threatened by Bratz, right? When they came out, they had to have been, because when you're talking years after you, I mean, the laws of gravity when it comes to lawsuits, and you may or may not agree with this, is whoever runs out of money first loses, right? So this thing went on for forever. $600 million between the two companies, and in the end, what happened? Did anybody win?
Well, it is a roller coaster case, and one of the things that made me want to tell this story, this particular courtroom drama, is that this case is tried twice. So it has really the same facts. You see it unfolding with two sets of judges, different set of jurors, so a different jury in the second trial, and two different teams of attorneys. And one of the great things that you see in the, I don't want to give spoilers of, both sides have these moments where they win their entire claims of, like, we own the entire empire of the other company. But what's really interesting is how much the characters, the personalities, the strategies that are picked in these different points of trial matter so much. It's really about the characters, and one of the very colorful characters that is takes up an entire chapter is Judge Kaczynski, who was very recently in the news. He was the chief judge of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and very recently he was the subject of sort of the Me Too movement of how did he treat his clerks, his involvement, his showing of pornography. And I show the seeds of that, that story also before the story broke in the news in the book, because there's just really the character of each one of these CEOs and the judges and the attorneys matters a lot in how they view the world and how they view competition and who owns ideas and what kinds of products and consumer psychology we should use.
Yeah, let's talk about that quickly. We got 2 minutes. So how it starts off is Carter Bryant. He worked for Mattel, right? So he took a little bit of time off, and he came up with this Bratz-style idea, and went over to MGA, and MGA bought it, and then it became an intellectual property dispute initiated by Mattel. They're saying, hey, you still work for us at this time, and so we own that idea, when in fact Brian at the time was off leave or something to that effect, right?
That's right. At least he claimed that. So, one of the things that happens when there's an intellectual property dispute, whether it's patent law or copyright or trade secrets, you really have to, the court has to get into the mind of the inventor and find out what is the truth here, where does inspiration come from, what is the eureka moment that really brings us to that burst of genius and creativity that produces new products. And that's where a lot of the drama of the trial happens, because he says, I was on leave, I don't owe my former employer anything, but Mattel, of course, wants to say that he was inspired by everything he did while he was working for them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're right, they have to get in. Was his eureka moment, was it at Mattel, or was it when he was on leave? And then they have to try to determine.
I think he had a very convincing story about, how Mattel, like many companies, has this story of they were super creative when they started.
Right.
You think about Apple as well. I think about Steve Jobs as like having these two different lives of, beginning of Apple.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I wish we had more time. This is so interesting. You Don't Own Me is the name of the book. Orly Lobel is who penned it. She's with us here today. Orly, where can we find it? Amazon?
Amazon and any bookseller.
Awesome. Head on over there.